This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America. I urge this Congress and all Americans to join with me in that effort.
It's true that Lyndon Johnson did propose a slightly shrunken federal budget in his first year as president, as well as laying those people off from the uranium plants. He did propose spending less overall than John F. Kennedy ever had as president. But, you know, the smallness of the size of his budget proposal that year was not for a lack of ambition for what LBJ wanted to do. That war on poverty that he declared 50 years ago tomorrow was not just a declared war, it was actually a fought war as part of the ambitious activist government of LBJ and the Great Society era. That Congress that he addressed 50 years ago this week, and the next Congress, President Johnson proposed more than 100 pieces of legislation to each of those Congresses that were, in fact, accepted by the Congress and enacted into law. Things like, oh, hey, Medicare and Head Start and the food stamp program in 1967, a big increase in Social Security benefits, coverage of nursing home care for elderly Americans, community health centers, job training programs. That speech, the start of all of it, was 50 years ago tomorrow. And so, tomorrow, in the Lyndon Baines Johnson room at the U.S. Capitol, which is just off the Senate floor, on the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty speech, the junior senator from Florida, Marco Rubio, will go before the cameras in the LBJ room on that anniversary so he can denounce LBJ as a failure. And we know that's what Marco Rubio is planning on doing tomorrow because he previewed his address this weekend with a sleepy-looking video that I think was filmed in a broom closet somewhere near his office.
Hello, I'm U.S. Senator Marco Rubio. 50 years ago, President Lyndon Johnson declared a big government war on poverty. After 50 years, isn't it time to declare big government's war on poverty a failure?
An appropriate question to ask on the anniversary of the War on Poverty speech, 50 years later. Every time we do get to a round-numbered anniversary of that speech, conservatives insist on declaring a total failure in the war. They insist on declaring that waging war on poverty is a stupid idea because, obviously, there's still poverty, and therefore everything done to fight it was a bad idea. And every year on round-numbered anniversaries of that speech, defenders of LBJ and people who think the government ought to pursue policies designed to minimize poverty argue for the successes of the war on poverty. LBJ's top aide on domestic affairs throughout his whole presidency and throughout this whole period was Joseph Califano. Joseph Califano has long been one of the loudest cheerleaders for the success of the war on poverty and the Great Society programs, arguing that those programs ought to be recognized as having worked. Quote, from 1963, when Lyndon Johnson took office, until 1970, as the impact of his Great Society programs were felt, the portion of Americans living below the poverty line dropped from 22.2% to 12.6%, the most dramatic decline over such a brief period in this century. And if you measure it that way, Joseph Califano is right. I mean, that is a reduction in poverty in this country of 43% over 8 years. And it's not magic or hard to see how it works. I mean, when President Johnson in the war on poverty made sure that every old person in the country had health insurance with Medicare, and when he greatly increased the amount of money that people got from Social Security, just the size of the check that you received as a Social Security recipient, doing things like that, had a huge impact on the number of elderly people in America who were poor. And it's not hard to see. Right now, if you look at the official poverty rate for old people in this country, just for the elderly, 44% of the elderly people in America would be considered poor, would be at or below the poverty line today, 44%, if you did not factor in their Social Security benefits. As it is, the elderly poverty rate in this country is only 9% because people do get Social Security. If you took away everybody's Social Security benefits, the elderly poverty rate would be 44%. This is not subtle stuff. This is not complicated math. Social Security, though, is kind of a singular example because Social Security is such a successful program and such a beloved and popular program that Washington hasn't been able to mess with it too much since President Johnson expanded it in the war on poverty. I mean, if you try to cut Social Security, you will get burned, just Ask Vice President Paul Ryan. But other war on poverty programs have not fared as well over the years as Social Security has. Michael Tomasky, writing in the Daily Beast this week, said that what's wrong with Marco Rubio's thinking when he declared the war on poverty a failure is that, quote, we have not, of course, been fighting any kind of serious war on poverty for 5 decades. We fought it with truly adequate funding for about 1 decade, less even. Then the backlash started, and by 1981, Ronald Reagan's government was fighting a war on the war on poverty. And he's right. Mocking and deriding and campaigning against programs to fight poverty was a big part of how Ronald Reagan got elected. And it was central to the whole idea of his presidency in terms of domestic policy.
My friends, some years ago, the federal government declared war on poverty, and poverty won.
Poverty won. We lost. We should stop fighting. Marco Rubio surely wants to be seen as Reagan-esque. Right now, he does have that same message. Stop fighting. To get people out of poverty, any policy effort to do that is big government that's doomed to fail. Still, though, Senator Rubio wants to run for president, and as part of wanting to run for president, he is going to give a speech in the LBJ room tomorrow, ostensibly about the issue of poverty and, from his perspective, why the government can't help. But it is a speech on the subject of poverty, and a lot of Republicans have been giving speeches and doing campaign-style events around the issue of poverty recently, which, if you really care about income inequality and the problem of deep poverty in this country, it is kind of a heartening development to see even Republicans talking about it. Rand Paul has been doing this sort of thing, too. He's been giving speeches in Detroit that, again, are mostly mocking and criticizing the idea that government can do anything about poverty, but at least he is talking about poverty. Senator Mike Lee has been talking about it, Congressman Eric Cantor, Paul Ryan, Senator Mitch McConnell. Whether you credit the leadership of Pope Francis or not, the issue of poverty has suddenly become popular in American politics.
Here we have Marco Rubio trying to reshape the image, and we have this memo from the Republican Party in the House today that basically says, well, members, we've got to coach you. You know, they had to coach the members how to talk about women's issues. Now they're saying we got to coach you on how to talk about being empathetic while we're blocking these programs, how to be empathetic so people won't realize just how much of a Grinch we are being.
Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, thank you for helping us understand this tonight. Stay in touch.